All right, welcome to Mr. Miller's Woodshop podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Miller. It's good to hear you again today we're talking about the end of the trimester or semester or quarter or whatever you are on, and this is largely for teachers, but students, you guys can listen in, get the inside baseball of how we do this. Industry partners, before you log off, please make sure you like and subscribe to me everywhere on Mr. Miller's Woodshop. So look me up on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Leave reviews, comment on stuff when you see it that's interesting. That helps me with the algorithm, so I'm very grateful for that. So let's get into it. So I'm right now looking at exactly 1 week to the end of the trimester, and I'm at the point where I've got only intro classes this trimester, but it is a little bit different when I've got advanced classes where I might have known these kids for 3 or 4 years, and this is really the time when I'm really kind of bumming during the trimester, and I'm very excited. Students are finishing their projects, they're bringing them home. It's a super fulfilling time in the students' lives, but I'm bummed because my job is about to change. My job is changing. I'm going to have a whole different load of kids in 2 weeks because we'll have Thanksgiving break. And we'll go back to training mode, learning names, and dealing with the behaviors of the first trimester. I mean, I've got such wonderful classes, and I'm in a great community here, and I just feel like I build such good rapport with my kids that I hate this time of the trimester where I know that it's ending. They don't quite know that yet. They're still so gung-ho to put that last coat of varnish on and work on that side project they've had their eye on all trimester, and I just get really kind of bummed this time of the trimester because I really do enjoy these kids, and I've had good success with students, and we're doing well, and you build rapport with these kids. I do a couple after school programs. We got a woodworking club. I do trap and skeet, and so I get to know them on a couple different bases, and I live in the community here too. And so I got, a unique perch of into student lives. And I'm coming up on my 10th, coming up on exactly 10 years when I entered the profession. And it's just kind of dawning on me like this is an interesting career. So I got a couple examples written down here. The last month I've had 2 students who have had their dogs die in a car accident, or one got hit by a train, and it's just, it sucks when you have to, you get those emails from the counselor and, or from their parent, and you pass it on to the counselors. And, if I've got them right away in the day, like one kid, he was in my first hour class, I get the email like end of the day before. And, I'm the first like adult outside his family that he's talking to. And I, kind of don't know what to do. I mean, I'm a woodshop teacher. I mean, a human being. I've got a family. I've been through trauma and chaos and, tragedies before in my own life and walked through it with family members. But now as like a teacher in this different role, I kind of got to take stock of like where I stand with the student, how they're doing in my class, and just, kind of utilize the influence I have in the kid's life to try to make that a little bit better. And so the kid that I saw, first, I was the first adult he's seen. I asked him how he was doing, and, his voice was kind of cracking as he was telling me what the circumstance was. He got let out. They live by the tracks, and all of a sudden, just a tragic situation, as he's describing it. And, I feel for the kid, and, he's going through it, like right in the thick of it. And I'm kind of, I'm able to relate a little bit. We put my dog down when I was a junior in high school, and we had a week's notice for that. This was, like a 6-year-old dog, and same with the other boy. Like he had a dog that was, not that much older, and he tragically passed away. And so I got this perch inside these kids' lives, and it's really, it affects me as a human being because there have been some ultra tragic. I'm fortunate enough to never have any of my students pass away. But there's been a couple instances where I marked them in my class, and then I'm the only adult that they've seen, and now they are a missing person. And this is going back years. And I remember my uncle actually texting me and like, hey, did you hear about this? And your name was brought up that you're the last one to, like, adult human being to see her. And it's like, yeah, I'm very well apprised of what's going on and trying to rack my brain of, like, what was different that day. I give the report of what she was wearing. And, thankfully, the situations that I'm describing now all kind of worked out for the good, or at least resolved themselves and, never happen again. So that's just a little piece that we get to be a part of as teachers and educators. Just in general, you've got this perch, and I think you use it. I'm a man of faith. I believe in Jesus, and so I'm praying for them, all of my students often. My family prays for them too when we start or end a semester, and I think that goes a long way. I think that contributes to our success, and it could mitigate some of the negatives. And not to turn this into the spiritual podcast, but I'm very thankful. I get this look into the lives that, we're building projects, we're a woodshop class, but, there's so many conversations that go on in the meantime, a couple boys that, hit it off and, like, okay, they're buddies. Oh my God, his dog died. Like, okay, I'm going to go to the buddy now and say, kind of let them know what happened, keep all the data privacy, of course, but like, hey, this kid's going to be kind of shooken up when he gets back. I saw you guys were buddies. Like, maybe check in with them, or hey, did you get his number? Maybe text him and see how he's doing if he wasn't there that day. And I think that's kind of part of that soft skills that they encourage us to do, and it's part of that full student formation that all the big times are telling us that we got to do. But it's just upbringing. I've got toddlers, and so I'm trying to deal with this and like the original, like, okay, my brother took my block. I punched my brother. Now that's wrong. Okay, let's work this out. How can we do this different? And so I'm kind of at home more in the basic, elements, but I'm kind of feel like I'm in the trenches here, and all of these IEP meetings and students with exceptionalities that are limiting at times. So, try to mitigate that with them. And it's so much fun because I see so much success in what I'm able to do and the technology and the machines that are available to us. Okay, you can't hold a full sheet of plywood. Okay, I'll drag it over for you, put it on the panel saw, and you can at least move the saw head now. So like, hey, you can do this. You just need to know what tools you need and how to use the tools, and that's what we set up for. It's funny, I read a book a few years ago on this, can't remember it, but it was a Secret Service guy, and I like kind of that nerdy history stuff. Like, okay, George H.W. Bush, like, what was he like really? And so this Secret Service book kind of brought me into that inside scope, and you hear how wonderful of a human being he was, and how on holidays he would not travel back to his home because so many of the Secret Service agents had their home in D.C., and so that's why he chose not to travel home for Christmas. And it's like, oh my God, how wonderful. And not like it's a political thing, but when he lost, that Secret Service agent said, like, he didn't say who he voted for, but he's like, part of me is lost too, because my job is changing, because the person that I'm hanging out with all day is not going to be the same person. And that's kind of was shocking to me as a first-time teacher. Like, I'd go through that first year, okay, this kid's been in my class all year. I've been having, like, conversations with him all day, and then he's just gone. Like, what the heck? And I'm sure there's a void left in his life, but I'm sure it's one that hopefully left a positive impression and gave him some tools to utilize in the future. But it does kind of wear on us as teachers at times too, like things, just that personal piece. And it's, I'm not complaining about it. This is the best job in the world. I would not want any other job but teaching high school kids how to use machines and build projects. I wouldn't even teach any other subject really if it wasn't hands-on. Like I have a social studies license too, and I actually don't, because I forfeited that this year, but I was licensed to teach social studies, and if they were ever to move me there, like I'd go work at UPS or something. I don't want to. I have a history degree. I love history, like I said, but I do not want to teach it to teenagers. That's just, I don't know, like trying to push a boulder uphill. It doesn't sound like very much fun. So it's a good gig that we've got. And so kind of getting back to end of the semester, kind of logistics here, kind of get away from the touchy-feely. Like, kids got to finish their projects. I do not want a bunch of half-done cabinets or half-completed furniture to deal with, even if it's paid for. I just don't want the job of taking it apart to utilize the scraps, or it's almost done, can I come back? I get 10 days after the trimester is done to get my grade up. Can I use those 10 days to get my project done? No, get it done for the trimester. I love end of the year because that is the day. Like, there's no extra time, and that's kind of how I set it up. And of course, for the right kid, I'm very graceful. If they've got an injury or if they had extended time, they had to leave for a funeral or something, like, yeah, okay, I'll reach out for that one. But I want those projects done, and I want them taken home. Maybe about a week ago, so about 2 weeks out from the end of the trimester, I start really lighting the fire under kids. Like, you got to get this done. We got to get a plan to get this home. And so I have them emailing their parents every week, project progress report of where they're at in their projects. And so I kind of start to adjust what I'm asking them to write to their parent, and not just, hey, I put on the knob for my end table, finished up the drawer, I'm sanding it now. That's great, but now I want you to ask your parents, where do you want this to go in our house? Have I paid for it yet? And the kids should know that. I've got a spreadsheet that tells me if they've paid or not, and so they're able to communicate to their parent, like, no, we haven't paid for this, and by the way, it's $40, and I think we should put it in our living room. It would match the cabinets well, the built-ins well, and blah, 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 right? That's what is kind of what I'm looking for in the email, and I'm hopeful that helps mitigate that problem. I don't think, so I ask other teachers, do you have issues with kids not finishing their projects? And they're like, oh, maybe 1 or 2 a year. And that's so bull. Like, I've probably got maybe 3 or 4, probably 3 or 4% is probably where I'll go percentage-wise. Like 3 or 4% don't finish in my classes each trimester. And so at the end of the year, I could have almost 10 end tables sitting there that are done, completed, or nearly completed. I just don't want the chore to take them apart, try to utilize the material. And I think the kids should have them. They should have them in their homes. And I was going to kind of talk about the money to take it home later on, but I guess I can cover that now. I love how Coon Rapids has it set up to where I don't touch any checks or cash. There's no Venmo. There's no money being accepted by me, which is so nice. We've got a finance window. The gal there is awesome. Kids bring their money to her, and she gives them a receipt. It's a paper receipt that she fills out in the moment. So she gets a copy, they get a copy, and then they're supposed to bring me that copy. And that is the ticket for them to bring their end tables home. I collect them, enter them into a spreadsheet. I'm perfect on this to where the kids give them to me, and so I'm holding everything. And if they ever forget, like, oh, did I pay it? It was $40 back in September. Let me go check. And I'm able to see on the spreadsheet, like, yep, you did. Good job. And then I've got that backup paper in a drawer on my desk, too, which is so nice. I had it at a different district to where I was collecting the money, bringing the money to the finance gal, and then it was input. And I hated that. I hated all of a sudden I've got $400 at my desk, cash. I hated that I have all these checks that, who does it go out to again? Like, oh, brother, I don't know. Is there a dash in Cambridge, Isani? Like, what is the process here? And a couple times, I'd go to the bathroom or I'd be meeting with a teacher or something, and then I would come back, and there would just be two $20 bills on my desk. And it's like, okay, no note, no nothing, just someone turned in $40, and they figured, like, yep, okay, I paid. Like, okay, I have no idea how to track that. Whose is it? I have a big, like, moral dilemma on my hands to, like, I'm just starting out my career, and money is tight. Now all of a sudden I've got $700, in my pocket, and so I wrote on the little hiding spot. I actually ended up putting a key behind it too, so it would be more secure. I wrote on the inside of it, "Thou shalt not steal," just to protect from other students who could possibly get into it, and just reminding myself that it's not worth it. Taking after school function, like, that's not going to be worth it. So I really like how it is here. There's no sense of, where is the money. It's all accounted for, and that is pretty cool. But you always get those kids that struggle, and I have them come to me on off to the side, because as I'm explaining what I just explained to you guys, I tell them, if you're having financial issues, if you know there's going to be money problems at home, come talk to me privately. Don't raise your hand now in front of the class, and we'll figure something out there. And there's all kinds of scholarships and programs and reduced fees for certain demographics, as far as what their income is or what their household marital status is. And it's really nice to get to know your social worker, your counselors, who can kind of know those avenues to go. There's some money in the Indian Ed department here, and we've been successful getting funding through that for students who weren't able to pay. And it's a crazy thing, but we gotta stay functional here. A couple of years ago, a company came through and donated like $3,000 worth of lumber just so that kids wouldn't have to pay for it. Like, that was awesome. That was so nice, because then it was donation, and they didn't even ask for a tax write-off, which was pretty cool. Like, it was a true donation. They weren't just trying to get rid of their scrap. I told them what I needed as far as like what kids can cut with, and I like one ripped edge. I like it selector better. I like milled to 13/16. So I'm pretty kind of picky, and they did all that. They gave me the best of the best, and I guess some of the walnut was a little bit to be desired, but I don't think they traffic in a lot of walnut anyway, so it's probably what they had. So I'm definitely not going to be complaining about stuff that was donated, but I thought that was pretty cool. Kid's dad worked at a lumber mill, was a big time executive there, and he's like, hey, what's the rest of the class going to take? And that was pretty neat. I think I talked about them too on my podcast on receiving donations. So if you want to know more about that, that's one of my first ones, probably inside the first 5 that I ever recorded. All right, let's kind of get back to this. I want kids finishing their projects, even if they can't pay for them. We figured out how to get it home for them. And it always works out like 2 weeks left of the trimester. I guess I shouldn't say always. I've gotten a lot better at this as my career has progressed, but it used to be the case where I'd have some kid who was amazing at hiding or pretending to work and just floated under the radar. Just those stealth kids that all of a sudden it's 2 weeks left in the trimester, and now I haven't done anything, Mr. Miller. I only cut out the practice cuts like from second week of school, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm grateful to report this really hasn't happened in the last couple of years. But you get some of those kids that are so dang good at hiding. And I've got classes that are filled to the brim. I've got 25 in each class, which is way too much for a shop class. So having less in a class would be easier to mitigate for this. But it's just the case too, where I've gotten better at it. And about a month in, I'll do like a progress check instead of my daily vocab, and I'll just say, everybody get every piece you've cut out in here and put it on your desk. And so that's when I can kind of sniff out the kids that are hiding when they only got 2 pieces on their desk when they should have a pile. It's like, okay, hey, I'm working with you directly now. And I guess part of this will be Mr. Kurt, my volunteer that comes in, because he's pretty good at sniffing out those kids too. And it's helpful, brings that ratio down. And it is always kind of funny too, because I kind of had this a couple weeks ago. A kid came to me and said, hey, would you mind helping me? I said, yeah, no problem. Where's your project at? And but this time everybody's projects were standing up, and he's like, I don't have that much cut out. I still got that big board that we laid out at the beginning, but that's in the cage where we store our stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, go get that. Go get everything else you've done, and we'll figure out what we got here. And that was probably with a month left in the trimester, and we've worked pretty close side by side at this point. And so it's cool when they come to me, because this is a kid that he's working with 2 other kids that are his buddies, and it looks like they're all working. They're at the saws, they're at all the stations, but it's like, what were you doing when your buddies were gluing up their panels? And it looked like you had something going there. He's like, oh, I was just helping them. Like, nah, dude, you're done helping. You're doing your own project. If you help, you're going to lose points. That's kind of how I be ironic and sarcastic, which is probably not the great teaching methodology, but for some odd reason, for the right kids, when you got that rapport, it works. I'm not going to come down on them for asking for help, so that's about that. Now, this is the kid, too, and they're are usually a handful that have dragged their feet at the beginning, or maybe they kind of stalled out in the center. And now, with about 8 days left in the trimester of working time, I tell them, if you haven't started on your drawer for your end table project or whatever, like last significant step before finishing staining in polyurethane, I'll tell them you're going to put a false front on your drawer cavity so that it looks like a drawer, but it's not actually a drawer. And I kind of draw them the illustration of a kitchen sink and how you usually got a drawer front in there, but there's no drawer because you've got that cavity filled where that sink sinks down. And so they understand that. They're bummed about that, but I want them to go home with a piece of furniture that is complete. And while the drawer doesn't work, at least it looks like it's something nice and you can put in your bedroom. And usually those are the ones that do live in the bedroom of their own bedroom, because it doesn't actually function as a drawer, but it does look darn nice. And so I've kind of planned that out, because for finishing, really, you need 5 days. And I give them 8 days just in case they're gone, I'm gone. We have fire drill or something that eats up a good chunk of the hour, because I don't want these kids leaving unfinished end tables. And so that's just another way I mitigate that. And the caveat I give them is like, some kids like, oh, but I really wanted a drawer. I so badly wanted a drawer. I told my parents I'm just about to start on the drawer. And say, okay, that's fine. You're not doing it in class time, though. You need to be at school tomorrow at 7 a.m. Okay, that's when I can help you. If you want to get there earlier, too, I can help. I'd gladly be here at 6. And we can knock that drawer out in probably an hour. And some kids have called my bluff on that, and they've shown up. I'll have a couple of kids, I'll come before school, and they show up like 5 minutes before the first bell rings for the day. It's like, this doesn't count. Like, we're not going to make a drawer here in a minute and a half. So come back tomorrow. I'm here at 7. If you want me to get here, just let me know. And, some kids really do that. And, well, can you stay after? Like, no, I'm going home. I'm going to see my family. Like, I gave you lots of class time, and the part of the driving factor of that is I've got 3 young kids at home and that I want to go see, and a smoking hot wife that I want to go and say hi to, and that's why I'm going home. And maybe my mind changes too when my kids grow up and get a little older, but I'm here and I got plenty of time in the morning. But after school, I'm looking out my window now. It's sunny. It's not 70, but it's sunny out, so I can go enjoy that with my kids. And I've given them that time in class, so that's kind of how I live with myself, doing that. And after that, too, I usually announce at the beginning of the day, like, hey, we got 6 days left of the trimester. And they'll, well, no, we got 8 days left. Like, well, actually, I'm speaking at a conference on Tuesday, and that last day, remember, is that cleanup final. And I'll get into that cleanup final here in a few minutes, because that is the slam dunk on the trimester, and it gets you set up for the next trimester. So just stay tuned for that. And since we are kind of taking a break here, please share this with somebody. If you know a teacher who teaches shop, send this to them. And whether or not they listen to it or not, it's just some pointers. And all of these, really, there's only a couple of things on my notes here that I came up with. These are things that I've gotten the benefit from other teachers telling me what to do or experienced them as a student. And so none of this is my brainchild, but it's cool when we can learn from each other. So, I tell them how many days they got left, how many, if they got any missing work, any missing vocab tests. I double check, and I hunt those kids down, which I shouldn't. I should kind of just leave that as a 0 and let them kind of have that natural consequence. But I don't know. I guess I'm a softie for that. I want them to do well, and I'll encourage them. Like, hey, you didn't turn up that drafting assignment. I know it's boring, but that's the sub-day assignment, and it is hurting your grade. So if you want to get that in, you can still turn it in for some points. And I get it. There's so much philosophical stuff and strategy and grading, and I'm a vocational class, so I kind of think, like, you show up, you get 15 points an hour for working, and some of the special things like tests and whatnot, those are kind of our bonuses kind of thing. And if you don't do them, you do lose points on them. And if you take missing work, if you're an educator, it's like, oh boy, you are so wonderful, welcoming, accepting. I tell that to my advisory board. Yep, we accept missing work. And they're like, oh, you're ruining them for us. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I want the kids to be successful. I don't want it to wreck their GPAs. They are doing stellar work with their hands, and so if that isn't reflected in their grade, there's something wrong. So I want their grades to reflect the work that they did on their projects, and it usually does based off of how I've got this set up. One thing I do want to get better, as the trimester starts to end, things kind of go off the rails as far as kids following the QR codes, and I probably just have to have a heart-to-heart with the kids because they start out of the gate so good following the QR code tutorial demonstrations, but as soon as the drawer gets tricky, as soon as they want to put any stain or polyurethane on, they got a million questions that are answered in the QR code, so I know they're not watching them, but I kind of think it's that, oh my gosh, the finish line is here, this thing is standing, and the drawer works, okay, I got to just paint it, and I'm done, is kind of what they say, and like, no, we're going to first stain, and then we're going to varnish it, and kind of go through the complexities of that, and it's so frustrating, too, because the staining video is 3 minutes. The sanding video is 3 minutes. The varnishing video is 3 minutes. Like, they're so... You can watch them during passing time, and yet they don't. So if anybody's got any tips or tricks of how to keep kids focused on following the plans when they're right at the finish line, like, send them to me because I'm still trying to figure that one out, too. And kind of on that note... once that project is standing, those kids are so excited to bring it home. And I have had some real tragedies in the past where a kid will make this beautiful, I'm thinking of one specifically, one of my favorite kids of all time, built this wonderful cherry bookshelf. And it was just immaculate. It had corbels off the side. It had raised panels. Each one of the shelves was cut specifically. And we didn't do any of this with a CNC. It was all by hand. And, like, this kid nailed it. But once that thing was done, he spent about 60 seconds sanding it, which just put more scratches in it because he used 80 grit. And then he brought it, and the way this shop was set up, their finishing room was kind of in a different part of the school. And so I had to basically walk about 100 yards to check in on him. So that it was for ventilation, of course, so that, no one would get sick with those fumes. And I walk over and I see him just smiling, putting the finish on, and I'm looking at this cherry, this glorious cherry, and it's like, oh my God, dude, what do we got going on here? And there's scratches all over it, and like the thing is toast. And he's happy with it, but this thing could be like 90% better if you would have spent another hour sanding it. Man, just such a bummer. But lesson learned, and he went on to be one of my favorite kids after that, like I said. And I talked to him about his shelf. Before he graduated, and I'm like, hey, do you look back on that and have any regrets or anything? He's like, I probably should have sanded it more. I think you told me I should sand it. And I don't think I did. Like, I don't think you did either. I remember that thing leaving, and like, yeah, what can I do about that? Like, not now unless you're willing to do even more sanding through all that varnish. He's like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll paint it black or something. Like, this goofy redneck kid. Like, okay, whatever, man. Like, it's paid for. It's brought it home. It's yours. Whatever you want with it. I think now I do a better job of it because I've got better equipment. We've got a downdraft table, so that makes it a little bit more comfortable. I got dust collection, too. I don't have any sanders set up with dust collection, which would be kind of nice just to eliminate that constant dust and coughing. I've had gals and guys, too, with severe allergies, and when you time it with fall and spring, that really just capitalizes on that, so kids don't want to sand. But I stress it pretty much, and I use that kid as an example, too, of like what his shelf looked like, what it could have been, and kind of tell that story. And kids do kind of get interested in sanding it well, and so that's nice that has actually improved throughout my career. Then when we get into staining and putting on our finish, I hate it. I hate it because as much as I can clearly explain what I want them to do via video, via like a live demonstration, and walk them through, how to apply the stain with the rag, wipe on with the grain. Think about Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, have a dry rag there to buff it so it's just that glorious wood grain coming through. it almost never happens. We always spill like half a can, like half a quart of stain on the floor. Some kids will splash into it, and we've got a great paint booth finishing room, so we've got the ventilation right there in my shop, and I come in time to time, and as much as I tell them, have the glove on, go slow, just dip the corner of that rag, it's almost inevitable. I've got a kid with no gloves on who will dip like his whole hand into the stain with his rag and start staining his project, and I just want to shake him like, what are you doing? And of course I don't, but it's just kind of funny, and I'm not immune to this either. I remember my first day on a cabinet, so my first day in a class of cabinetry, they had me staining because that's what the new guys do. That's what the grunt labor does, and we're staining on this gunmetal like gray onto poplar. And I'm nervous. I'm really nervous on my first day on a real cabinet shop. I already started my job as a woodworker, so they're kind of thinking like, are you a woodshop teacher? Are you learning? Or like they're really kind of like wondering what I'm there for. And it was a wonderful learning experience. I think I've talked about that in my background episode. If you want to know more about that shop there's a lot too that has happened since, and some of it tragic, some of it sad, but they're not in business anymore, and that's probably for the best of society. But it was kind of anyway, just kind of moving on. My first day, staining, I'm nervous. I wiped on the stain. I forgot to wipe it off, and it was, hot summer. It cured, and so we had to actually sand through all that stain. So I'm not saying I'm Mr. King wood finisher here. That's where I think I could probably grow the most, because at that shop, after that, I didn't have much credit for finishing, and I wanted to learn how to spray. And the guy that sprayed, he saw his value as I'm the only guy who knows how to shoot cabinets, and he didn't train me, and he had good response too, like, well, you're going to be gone in 2 months, so why am I going to spend all this time teaching you when I can just go and do it? Like, okay, thanks, jerk. But yeah, okay, I guess I'm not spraying here. I did everything else, like tip to toe in cabinets, as far as like milling the wood for face frames, building cabinet boxes, uppers, lowers, build the doors, 5-piece drawer fronts, all the assembly, door construction, finishing, and then hangout, putting on all the hardware. Like I did and all the installs. I was the guy, walking them upstairs and installing them too. So that was a great experience. But yeah, I'm kind of getting off subject here. But finishing with kids is one thing too, because they're going to make messes. They're clumsy. They're awkward. Oh my gosh, that gal that I like is next to me now. And now you compound that awkwardness 30 times, and there's always a spill, right? And last year we had one of the most remarkable spills that we've ever had. We had a quart of lacquer. It was probably half full, and we had some paper covering the tables, and she set it down on the paper, but there was no table underneath. It was just kind of where the overhang was, and it was as I'm explaining this, and I think she was nervous too, because, just for whatever reason, I don't understand, like, she set it down, and then it fell on its top, and the top was off, but all of that lacquer was still inside of it, and we each panicked, and she quick grabbed it and quick flipped it, so we saved maybe 10% of it, but all that lacquer now is on the floor, and it's like, oh brother, okay, well, you'll probably get yours coated, but that probably screwed the last half of the class, so I'll be going to Menards later that day, so I kind of plan on a Menards trip about this time too, because some kid will get halfway through staining his project at times, and oh, we're out of dark walnut stain. Now, what should I do? Should I just use this stuff? Oh my God, no. You're not going to have half color this, half color different, and so sometimes it's funny too, the things that they say, but it's just kind of a crazy thing, and then you go from wiping on with rags to then brushing on. And I try to have kids bring in their own brushes so we can just dispose of them afterwards. I'm not trying to reclaim brushes. We just use the disposable ones anyway. You buy bulk at Menards, and we try to, you reuse them if I got back-to-back classes. But a lot of times it just gets tossed, and that brings up a new like topic too. Like, all right, we're finishing. We got lots of stain and polyurethane, oil-based stuff, and how do we dispose of that in a school? And a couple of years ago, a local school, not mine, but in our district, had some kids not follow protocol, throw their stain rags in just a normal trash can instead of a metal like rag containment unit. And it actually started to smolder, and if a janitor didn't catch it, their whole wood shop probably would have went up in flames. And so I move away all the trash cans that are like within 50 feet of the finishing room so that my kids don't make that mistake. And some kids will be like, hey, where'd the trash can go by the sink? Because the sink is right outside there. And I'm like, oh, and I just played on. I'm like, oh, I don't know where the thing went. Like, no, it's in my office. I know where it's at. Throw everything trash-wise in the finishing room in those red fire cans. So we don't have a big fire here, and I can keep my job. So it's kind of that. The one thing I will say on finishing, and I don't understand why this works, but you can see it in action in my YouTube channel, Mr. Mills Woodshop on YouTube. My finishing videos, I tell my kids to wear one glove. So like one glove, and you can have one dirty hand, but keep one hand clean. And, I make the joke, like, this is the best Michael Jackson impersonation. And it happened organically. And the reason why I do it is because kids are way more cleaner for some reason. They're way more cleaner with wearing just one glove. I had a shortness of gloves a couple of years ago, and I told the kids, like, you know what? To make it fair, everyone just uses one glove. And they do it at different times, so sometimes kids don't pay attention to this. But I tell them, okay, one glove, and we're cleaner. And I don't understand that, but that class that I was low on, and they did one glove, I mean, it was like we had no spills. Nobody was dunking their whole hand into the can of stain. And I've just done it ever since, and it seems to work pretty good. I even tested it with adults last summer when I did the safety speed seminars, and it worked there too, because some people didn't listen, right? Even as adults, they won't catch all the instructions, and so they double glove up, and it's like, hey, they worked there. Like, these are their gloves that I stole from their station. And they glove up, and it's like, oh man, they're the ones that kind of had that splatter that went onto the other student or the other person's project. And it's like, maybe that wouldn't happen if they were in one glove. So let's see, I'm just kind of checking my notes here. Okay, so once kids are done, this is where it is really exciting. If you go back to my conference night podcast, where what do you do during conference night? Like, you make the shop better. And when I have got all these kids that are done with their project that have a skill set now, and they're trained in on all the machines, like, that's when we can have some fun. And it usually is like my best kids will finish a month out. Some of my worst will finish in a year when they come back and retake the class. But that month, like when I have my rock stars, like, they'll do a cutting board. I intentionally start the cutting board project about 3/4 of the way through the trimester so that I can kind of get rid of some scrap. And a lot of shop teachers start with it because it is such a quick turnaround as far as like the project being done. But I like it to clean up some of my scrap that kids have been making. It's kind of a nice Friday project, and I use it as kind of a carrot. And I'll say, like, kids who have their projects that are standing up now, you guys can start on the cutting board assignment. So that kind of motivates them and kind of isolates some of those kids that have been falling behind, so I can kind of check in on them. And, like, making a cutting board, a long grain cutting board is so simple. We've got a planer, we've got wide belt sander, all the cutting and routing capabilities. Kids know how to glue up a panel and glue up on the faces, because that's how we achieve the thickness for our legs, is like we're gluing face to face. Like, kids know these skills after about the first 2 weeks of actually starting the end table project. There's no reason I gotta like change that around. And that was a big controversial thing when I started here. Like, oh, so you're gonna start with like the cutting board like the rest of us? Like, no, we do that later. Oh, you're gonna start with the complicated stuff? Like, no, I'm putting them off to the races. I've got all these resources for them. I've done this before, trust me, and I'm not trying to be arrogant of that. I've just seen so much fruit in doing it this way. And you start with the cutting board, and that it becomes this big mental block for the kids who don't get it right away. And now all of a sudden, instead of that kid being a couple days behind, like, they're a couple weeks behind. So that's why I don't do it. And if you disagree, like whatever. If whatever works for you. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I'm just saying what works for me in all of this. And if you've listened to this point, you probably have the same philosophy. So cutting boards. I want to get into spoon carving. I've got some kids like playing with Dremels, and so I've done some like traditional carving, some end grain cutting boards. This is the time too, especially if I got a kid with more than a week. Like, let's do some cool CNC projects. I've got these 2 small Tormach mills in my room, CNC mills, and like they're as big as a 3D printer. They're probably 18 inches by 18 inches by 18 inches, like a cube on one of the desks that I've got a bunch of files that I purchased on my own that kids can choose from, or they can design their own. And this is with a couple weeks left. It's outside of our curriculum that we're supposed to teach, but I like to give them this opportunity, especially for those high flyers, to experience automation that first round in an intro cabinetry class. Like, this is what the industry is like. Now, they're milling out boring cabinet parts with rabbets and dados. You've done that on a table saw. Let's do something cool. Let's do a 3D carving, or let's write your name into a piece of wood, or Lake Life, or Welcome, or Merry Christmas or something into a piece of wood. And they get a lot out of that. And I've got everything automated as far as like how I'm teaching that with QR codes on project plans, and I'm willing to share those with anybody who wants them for free. So just reach out, Mr. Mills Woodshop. Might take a couple days to get them to you, but it's pretty cool. And one of them is so good that I created about a year ago that I intentionally tell these kids who finished early, like, you're done. I'm done helping you. Like, you've done it. You've passed the class. Congratulations. So I am going to focus on the kids who are still learning what you've already learned. These videos will bring you through and answer every one of your questions. And it kind of depends on the kid, too. If a kid is really a go-getter, like I'll tell them, like, you're done. No more questions. You got to figure it out on your own. Just check in with me before you hit go so that I can double-check some things. And if it's a kid that has been asking a bunch of questions, or just, maybe they're on a special plan or something, I'll jokingly say, like, okay, you get 3 questions, or you get 5 questions, and that's it. That's all I'm going to answer. And that kind of came organically, too. A couple of years ago, I had a kid who would ask a question about everything. He would watch the demonstration videos. He would do everything correctly. He'd get everything set up, but then he'd come over like, hey, we double-check this. And he wasn't scared. It was just like, man, why? And so he was the one that I told him, like, you got 3 questions on this assignment. And at that point, the kid was capable. He had the skill set. He went through and made the project and didn't ask any questions. And all of a sudden, he's got this 3D carved Last Supper, for him to bring home. And his parents are so excited because, like, oh my gosh, that's Da Vinci's artwork. 3-dimensional. Da Vinci couldn't even do that, kind of joking around. And I've had kids do other stuff. I got a bunch of friends who are into hunting, and so I got a bunch of nature scenes and cabin backgrounds. So we do 3D carving with that, but tons of signs. And even on the big CNC too, I've got some decent videos for how to design your own doorway sign, entryway sign. And so a bunch of those have come through. Those are more big ticket items though, because they're bigger pieces of wood, and so I generally have charged kids like $5 for a sign, which is nothing if you want to go and buy that at Hobby Lobby. It's going to be way more expensive and way less quality. So at least here you get a decent piece of wood, and you can finish it too because you've got that skill set as well. So that's kind of nice because I make the kids do something. They can't just put their head down. They can't, quote unquote, help their buddy, which just means hang out with their buddy while they finish their project. Like, no, in order to get points in here, you got to be working. When you show up to work, you got to work. Even if your main project is done, you need to find something to do. I have all of these assignments, all of these projects you could do that'll take a week, a couple weeks, a couple days, and it says that on the plans too. So just go pick one. And if they still aren't picking one, or I was like, I don't want to do any of them, okay, fine. Well, here's all the things that I have got on my to-do list, and I always have something to do for a teacher's assistant or my volunteer. And sometimes it's easy. It's like, I want to reorganize the tool box, and so why don't you take out all the tools and put them back in? However it makes sense to you will work for me, and just let me know your system before you go. And if it's good, we'll keep it. If not, we'll adjust. And so that's been kind of nice. I've had shelves built for us to store our binders so kids can keep all their materials in the room. There's always a teacher that thinks I have kids. Oh, if you had someone with nothing to do, could you have them make me this custom thing? And I hate it when teachers ask me that too, because it's like the premise of the question is like, oh, the kid's not doing anything like that. Then that student is not doing expectations. And if that's the case in your class, like that's wrong. Like, oh, no, they're done, so they're just, they're putzing on their phone now because they're done. Like, no, that doesn't fly in my class. Like, we are working in here, or you are losing your points. And I've got it set up to where a kid gets 10 points for how they work in my class every single day, and 5 points for how they clean. They get 15 points every day. The end of the week, oh, brother, what is 15 times 5? I don't know what that is, but every 2 weeks, it's 150 points for them. I got to do that today, actually. Give them their paychecks is what I call them, because it's like me. If I don't show up to work or if I show up and sleep, I'm not getting paid. And so that's how I've got it kind of built in. And there's, like I said earlier, so many things to talk about as far as like grading wise. Like there's so many philosophies and whatnot, but yeah, I'm really kind of going along here. And in fact, maybe, I guess I got to kind of wrap this up, but I want to talk about my cleanup final. I'm going to talk about that here. This is just going to be a little bit longer, okay? So my cleanup final is the last day of the trimester. It is a final exam. It's not their like common summative assessment where they're actually being graded, but it is an exam where they're going to be graded based on how they clean. And we take the full hour to clean the full shop. You do your cleanup job first. You organize your binder, take out all the stuff from your locker. Like, we're gutting this place. You should not have any trace left in this room after today. And so I make it worth a full letter grade. And I didn't come up with this idea. This was baked into my old high school shop teacher doing this. And I've connected with him since. And he's like, oh, I actually got that from the autos teacher at Spring Lake Park. I'm like, oh, my God, okay. And then I think, like, that's right. I remember doing that. Like, yeah, it was a big deal. And I got to run here pretty quick, but the cleanup final is just so big because you get all your special little projects done, the deep clean of the machines, you grease your machines, and I have it set too, like I'll say if a kid is goofing off or if I see even a phone come out of your pocket, you lose 10% right there. And I'm pretty intense in this moment too because it is, truthfully, it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, I'm the one that has to do it, and if I don't nail this, it's going to be hours of work for me, whereas it's a couple minutes for an entire class of 25 kids to just do, like, okay, we're going to clean out the nasty old time saver. Like, okay, I'm going to need a couple kids to do this because that'll take them 20 minutes where it would take me an hour because there's 3 of them and 1 of me. And so that's kind of how I break it down. And I rarely have these issues, too, because I put music on. I'm hollering and, kind of in a positive way of like, let's go, all right, let's get those brooms moving. And they respond well to that, and, they kind of make it fun. So there's only been a couple times where I've actually nailed a kid for, being on their phone or sleeping or not doing what's expected, because I drum them up, too, and tell them this beforehand. Like, all right, we're doing cleanup final on Friday. If you're going to be gone, we got to catch up beforehand so you don't lose out on that full letter's worth of points. And I've been successful on that. But usually midway through the hour, I'll make an announcement. It's like, you guys are all doing great. Only 2 people have lost points so far. And a bunch of people will look around and was like, oh, my God, who are the 2 people? When in reality, it's not anybody. But that just kind of motivates them because now they've been sweeping for about 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And they're like, oh, my God, how much more can I do with this? And then they realize, like, oh, okay, that's right. He said the full hour, and that's not even really true. At the end, maybe 15 minutes left, I tell them, like, get to a good stopping point, hang up your broom or whatever you're doing, and go sit down. And once they're all seated, I'll have a couple of dowels in my pocket, and it's been so dusty. Like, we blow the ceiling off with air and sweep down the walls so that all the dust settles. Like, it's dusty in there. And I'll have dowels in my pocket, and I'll just kind of hide them in my hand and pretend like I'm, getting a booger out of my nose or something, and just kind of cover the dowels. And then I'll show them to the class, like, oh, my God, it was dusty today. And they don't know what dowels are at this point. And maybe some of them do. I suppose we do for some of our smaller projects, but they look at that, they're like, oh my God, that was in his nose. And then they realize, like, oh, okay, it's just a joke here. But I end with silent ball, and I like that because they're using their hands. And a lot of times there's athletes, so it gets competitive. And so I'll say, like, all right, put one arm behind your back. You can't catch it by trapping it against your body. And then with about like 5 minutes left in class, if we've gone through a rotation of this or not, I'll say, okay, cover one eye and try to do it. And I got a little bit of insight into this when I was 15. I got hit in the face with a baseball bat, and I lost. I'm healthy now, happy now, fully functional now. But that summer, I didn't have very good vision out of my left eye, and you only lose like 20% of your vision, but you lose 90% of your depth perception. And so now all of a sudden, with one eye covered in silent ball, you've got a ball coming at you that you can't gauge. And so all the athletes immediately, confidence is still high. They think they can do it because they've won 2 rounds already. They're the ones that go out first. And it's usually the kid that nobody's been thrown to. Like, that's the one that wins because they're just the one who's last. And I kind of make that big deal. It's like, you know what, you can probably do your job without a finger. You can probably make it work with one hand, but you can't with one eye. And so that is why I say at the beginning of every hour before we go out to work, grab your safety glasses, roll up your sleeves, and get to work. And that kind of brings it to fruition because they have heard me say that. Grab your safety glasses, roll up your sleeves, and get to work every single day. And now they're like, okay, that actually meant something. And at the time, too, sometimes the kids don't even listen to that. I have to come back and be like, hey, man, get those glasses on. Or they'll come up with a question. Hey, I don't understand how to fit my drawer. I'm like, okay, when you put on glasses, I'll come and happily answer it for you. And then they shrug and roll their eyes and go get them on. But it's like, all right, it's important. And so that allows them to see that a little bit. It's a nice little fun thing for us to do. And I'll even tell the deep dive story of how I got hit in the face with a baseball bat at the end if there's time. And kids love to play 20 questions at the end. It's like, okay, hey, so how did you meet your wife? And what's your dog's name? Or like, what was it like teaching up in Cambridge? And, just those little weird questions that kids ask. Did you play any high school sports? Just those silly things. It's kind of fun for time with that. And have them put their chairs up. We'll meet by the door. And the entire time, too, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the tools. I never have issues with kids stealing stuff, but I just have it in the back of my mind. Like, I've heard horror stories of kids, like, loading up drills in their bag, but I've got it where the bags are hanging out the hooks right by the door, so it's kind of a non-issue. It would be really hard to steal stuff based on the system that I got set up. So that's not really an issue. We can kind of just hang out and smile by the door, and then once the bell rings and they're out of here forever, I try to shake as many hands as I can. Kids kind of want to fly out too, especially like at the end of the year, or usually now it's a big break by the end of the trimester, so they got a week off after they're done seeing me, so they want to fly out. But a lot of them too will thank me, face to face with a handshake, and those are the ones I feel like I did the best with. Even if they built a crummy end table, like if they're a decent human being, and they've got some skills that they can build upon where they wouldn't have otherwise, like that's success to me. So that's what the end of the semester looks like for me. It generally goes pretty good. I get a lot of students who want to take my classes again, and it's because of that memories that they had those last 2 semesters. They don't remember safety training all that well. Those first cuts through the table saw they probably remember, but then the actual building, cutting out their projects, they don't remember. They remember that last instance they had in your class. And so I think that's why I get such high turnaround where students take my classes again. I don't think it's my personality. I just think it's the experience that I give them in my classes. And I tell them, like, it's a big compliment to me when you come back and you're like, oh, what was your name? It's like, yes, okay, that is my win, to where it's not about me. The class was about you. You enjoyed it. That's a good thing, but it wasn't because of me. So if you got anything to add on this too, I'm just talking to myself here alone in my crowded lumber yard right now. My room where I store my lumber is also where we store our finished projects. So I'm like jammed between a rocking chair and like 3 piled up end tables trying to talk to you folks. So to help me feel like less insane, comment on my stuff, reply back to this, rate the show, and just I'm Mr. Miller's Woodshop everywhere, so please get in contact with me. I'd love to hear from you, and will help make each other better. So thanks for listening. Oh my God, that was 55 minutes. Good for you. Talk to you later, folks.